There has certainly been a number of notable rebellions from Conservative former ministers, including people like Ken Clarke, the former Chancellor. The sort of opposition has been congregated predominantly amongst the opposition parties, so Labour, the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, so on and so forth. But there is still a big chunk of what are known as crossbenchers, people who don't have a party political affiliation, who say they hold apolitical moral, legal concerns about the emergency legislation in its current form, and they feel that the Prime Minister is trying to railroad something through the House of Lords that he doesn't have a mandate for. The Rwanda plan wasn't included in the 2019 Conservative manifesto. Rishi Sunak himself has no personal mandate from the country to deliver it. So there are those that think that it's a bit rich for him to be sort of claiming he's standing up for the public whilst standing against those who are unelected peers.
Yeah, and Aubrey, Sunak, as you said, he is taking aim at Labour. It's Labour's fault this hasn't gone through. It's lefty lawyers' faults that the planes aren't taking off. But Robert Jenrick, when he was immigration minister, he voted against it at one stage. Then he resigned because he said it's not going far enough and this is not going to get through the House of Lords. But Sunak seems to have forgotten that. He's wiped it from his memory. The problem is not with his own party. The problem is with everyone else outside of the Blues.
There's certainly been a huge amount of bitter Conservative infighting on this point. You'll remember that Rishi Sunak at one point lost one of the deputy chairmen of his party, Lee Anderson, who held that role at the time, and another vice chair, Brendan Clark-Smith, because they felt that this legislation was too weak. And I actually think there's an interesting question for what those on the right of the party do if Rishi Sunak succeeds in getting this legislation passed and flights off the ground. People like Robert Jenrick, who you mentioned, also Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, they all claimed that the legislation was too weak, it wasn't tough enough, it wouldn't work. So what does the right of the party do if actually the legislation has its intended effect and does get flights off the ground? There is a sort of potential problem brewing for those people who might be considered in the future potential leadership candidates who have set so much in trying to resist this legislation. Actually, if it works in achieving flights being able to take off where people like Suella Braverman failed, then that's quite a significant victory for Downing Street.
Well, I'm also surprised at how actually ready and prepared Sunak is for these flights. We've got commercial charter planes ready to go. 500 staff, I believe, already trained and ready to escort asylum seekers onto those planes. Another 300 ready to join them as well after that. Behind the scenes and very quietly, he actually has been working to make sure that these flights can take off if the bill passes.
Yeah, certainly. I think the government realises that because there has been such a significant delay to this plan, it needed to act as quickly as possible. I mean, I went to the original press conference that was held down in Kent when Boris Johnson, as Prime Minister, announced this very new, novel and controversial scheme. And I never really imagined that 2 years later, we'd still be sat here talking about whether or not it would ever happen, and if it did, whether it would have the required deterrent effect the government suggests that it will. So, yes, ministers realise they need to act quickly. They have sort of pinned their hopes on getting flights off from the 1st of July. Obviously, if you are CCHQ, Conservative Central Headquarters, you have an electoral imperative to try and get these flights in the air as soon as possible. The party is seemingly losing voters to reform, so losing people on the right, it's losing members of the Labour Party on the left as well, because some voters just don't think the government is up to delivering anything anymore. So actually, there was a really interesting part of Rishi Sunak's press conference earlier when he told us there was only one party who could deliver this plan, and it felt like it was a pot shot aimed at those sort of rivals on the right and the left who are trying to take chunks out of them politically. I think he's really trying to solidify that vote for the Conservatives so that they don't get annihilated at the next election.
Well, Aubrey, what parts of the bill specifically is it that the Lords are against, or what parts do the Lords want to be amended and brought back in?
So there's two main sort of arguments going on at the moment. The first is that some peers want to insert into the bill that nobody who from Afghanistan and assisted the British military over there could be removed to Rwanda. And the second is about requiring sort of independent verification of Rwanda's safety as a place to send people who might want to apply for asylum, because of course the UK does take asylum seekers from Rwanda as well. So those are the two main issues at play here. They've obviously been thrashed out over and over again between MPs and Lords. There's been some speculation that the government could concede some ground, but it seems to think that any amendment is a weakening of the bill and there cannot be any loopholes whatsoever. They think really this is their final chance to get it right.
Why would the government be against helping asylum seekers from Afghanistan, especially people who have helped us in our fight against the Taliban, people who put themselves in danger and the lives of their families in danger to help the British and the Allied forces? Why would that be a bad thing? Surely that's something the government should be doing automatically.
Well, it comes down to a sort of matter of existing protocols. So there are currently schemes to allow people who assisted the UK armed forces in Afghanistan to come to the UK, various different schemes. But those are schemes that exist legally, i.e. that people should use if they wanted to come to Britain instead of arriving irregularly, i.e. on a small boat. So the government argues it doesn't want to make any exemptions for anyone whatsoever. There are already schemes, it says, for people who did help the British military in Afghanistan to come to the UK. And any weakening of this legislation, ministers say, is a sort of, is a recipe for disaster, because it means that it will once again be subject to legal challenge, held up by the courts, and therefore not likely to be implemented in time for the general election.
OK, Aubrey Allegretti, Chief Political Correspondent at The Times there. Thank you very much for your time.